You are now entering Nick and Mello's hyperspace.
Hello, I'm Carmelo, and my favorite Rogue One character is K2SO. I love that droid.
I'm Nick, and I love K2SO, but I have to go with Chirrut Imwe. He is my favorite. He's such a badass.
He's pretty up there for me, too. In our journey through hyperspace, we examine everything and anything Star Wars from the point of view of two lifelong fans, one young, one old, who came together through the will of the Force.
So in this episode, we are going to talk about Rogue One. And honestly, we did this because of, well, Carmelo loves this movie so much, but also Andor is going to be here very soon. So we thought this would be perfect timing to talk about this movie. And Carmelo, I think this is actually the first movie we're going to talk about, like dedicate a whole episode to. We haven't done that to any of the other movies yet.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And we were also thinking about maybe for every season, choose a movie of of all the films so we can sort of slowly go through all of them and talk about them in detail. But it's really fun going back to this one with Andor coming so soon. And I managed to see it on IMAX a couple of weeks ago.
How fun.
Which was a marvelous experience. And I usually hate IMAX because it's too loud. But this one, they managed to do the volume just right. It was loud and exciting, but it was not like covering my ears too loud. That has been my experience in the past, so that's really wonderful. And it's also really fun because this is sort of the first movie not part of the Skywalker saga in the sort of traditional sense. It is connected to the Skywalker saga, but it is the first of these a Star Wars story films like Solo, who are sort of like accompanying films.
Yeah, spin-offs.
It's a spin-off. And I want to start by saying that the first time I saw it, I was not in love. I liked it, but I wasn't gaga. Now I am. But I think because I'm terrible. Carmelo's terrible at expectations, and so I sort of had in mind something in me, and it just sort of wasn't it. But the more I saw it, the more I started realizing, okay, this is the kind of film that it is. But I think the thing that I loved from the very beginning, Nick, were the characters. Even if on my first viewing, I wasn't totally in love with the movie itself, I thought the characters were amazing. I loved the characterization and the way the film sort of developed who these people are and why they are doing what they're doing. And that I found really wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm the opposite of you. We talked about this before we started recording. I really liked it at first, and not that I dislike it now, but the more I sit with it, it's not one of my favorite Star Wars movies. It's not one that I'm going to revisit a whole lot. And, this was the first time I watched it in probably 2 or 3 years. And
wow. Okay.
It's been a while. But when I watched it, I had a good time. This was probably my favorite viewing. I watched it with my wife, Haley. This was her first time seeing it. So maybe that had something to do with it. I thought the movie kind of dragged in some spots, but when I watched it last night with her, it kind of just, maybe because I knew the story and I knew what was coming, but it felt very like the pacing. I hear one of the main complaints I do hear about this movie is the pacing, but to me, it went by quick.
I remember my reaction the first time was that once they decided to go to Scarif, the movie sort of picked up for what I expected. And I thought the first part of the film was sort of a lot of exposition. But now I really like that exposition because it gave me time to know who these people were. And I think on first viewing, I just got a little impatient, sort of like, can this movie please start?
Right.
But now I really enjoy it, knowing that the first half of the film is about letting us know who these people are, and then how they go about stealing the plans from Scarif and all of that. And audience, I'm doing the beach because the Battle of Scarif was in this sort of very beachy, tropical place. And I'm from Puerto Rico, and I love the beach and palm trees and blue skies.
And he's wearing his button-up shirt.
And I'm wearing this was the first shirt I ever made for myself.
Oh, cool. Okay.
During the pandemic, I was bored. I had finished writing my Star Wars book, and I'm like, and what the fuck do I do now? And I had started learning to sew for cosplaying. So I said, I'm just going to go online and see if I can find some sort of Star Wars fabric. And then I saw my favorite droid turn into a fabric, and I'm like,
he's funny.
This is it.
He's great.
And it's a very comfy. It's cotton poly. It just irons well.
It looks awesome. I love it.
Well, it's really quite wonderful.
It's funny
But
you say
anyway,
that.
back to the movie.
It was just funny you say that. Haley, though, this is her first viewing, and she loved K2SO. She thought he was hilarious. All his lines were funny. She said he was just hilarious. She said if he was like an aggressive C-3PO.
And I love the idea. I love the idea of having an Imperial droid that has been reprogrammed.
Mm-hmm.
And that reprogramming has created this brutally honest droid.
Right.
It's just delightful. I love all the intricacies of his. In my Star Wars book, I talk about the whole idea of artificial life in Star Wars,
mm-hmm.
and I love sort of the addition of K2SO to that world of droids in Rogue One.
I was going to say, you at the top you mentioned the characters is what you really liked about this movie, and last night, and I think I've appreciated this character more this last viewing, is Orson Krennic. He's a great villain. I like him. I really liked him a lot more this time around than any other time for some reason. But he was very intimidating, and it was just really cool to see him in this movie. I'd like to see more of him somewhere, but he's really awesome. I enjoyed this. He
shows up in one of the new Thrawn novels.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So if Thrawn Treason, I think it's in the third of the last one of the first trilogy.
That takes place right as Rebels is ending, I believe, right?
Yes, and he's really wonderful in that book. So, you haven't read the Thrawn novels, have you?
I have not. No.
Homework, Mister. Hell.
I was going to say and I loved it because Star Wars does this. It makes connections all the time throughout other media, and one that I remember from Rebels was during Rebels. I believe it was in season 3 or 4. Tarkin tells Thrawn that they're going to kind of stop his TIE Defender project, and they're going to work on Project Stardust, which we know is the Death Star. Right. And it's just fun seeing that connection. And I forgot that they called it that. And then this movie, when they said Stardust, I thought, oh yeah, that's from Rebels. Yeah.
Yep. And that little plot in Rebels is an entire novel in the Thrawn trilogy.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's Thrawn Treason. I think you seriously should consider taking a leave of absence from your master's degree for a semester.
Reading all these Star Wars books,
novels. Yeah, I think this is more important. Social work can wait a semester.
Oh man, that's fun. That's fun.
No, you're right about Krennic. Krennic, I love somebody who is in the Empire, invested in the Empire, but is also frustrated about the bureaucracy and the corruption that exists. And so I love that tension that he has with Tarkin about who's in charge of the Death Star now. I really love this idea that he, it was really interesting. I watched a video of Claudia Gray, the author, the Star Wars author, talking about Lost Stars in a convention in Seattle, and he was saying, evil characters or villains are not so much about sort of being evil in a melodramatic way. It's about characters who think what they're doing is right. Mm-hmm. That the way that I'm going to do this is the way to do it. And Krennic honestly believes that terror will bring peace to the galaxy. He completely believes that. And in a way that makes him really scary.
Well, he says it in his introduction to the movie when they go to get Galen Erso. He says, we're going to bring peace and order to the galaxy. And he said, you mean more like terror? He said, whatever works.
Yes. I think the line is, well, we got to start somewhere.
That's what it is. Yeah.
We got to start somewhere.
Right.
That's a disturbing line.
That is very dark.
But it just makes it, that's the perfect line for a villain. That's the perfect line for a villain. I love to talk about the Guardians of the Whills because
they're fascinating.
They are just a beautiful addition to the Star Wars lore.
They are cool. I said sure it is my favorite. I just enjoy, there a lot of people say they like this movie because it's detached from the Jedi. and this is just about a group of people having to win a battle without a Jedi swooping in and saving the day.
Right.
Chirrut is the closest thing we have to a Jedi that's not a Jedi, and
Right.
he's such a badass. I remember watching it the first time, and I just like the idea of characters in Star Wars. Not necessarily. I mean, he is in tune with the Force, but he's not a Jedi, if that makes sense.
Right.
He believes they're the Force, and but he does not. He's not trained like by a Jedi. He's not. He didn't grow up as a Padawan or anything like that. He's very in tune with the Force, and he's blind. So I told Haley he's like the Daredevil of the Star Wars universe.
Fun.
Yeah, and he's just really cool, and I enjoy seeing that kind of side. Well, Maz Kanata is another character I enjoy because of her connection to the Force, even if she's not Force sensitive herself. That's fun. We need more of that in Star Wars.
I love the combination of having Chirrut trusting so much in the Force and Baze Malbus, his companion partner, as a guardian of the will, as somebody who has sort of like abandoned or being disillusioned by the Force. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the film, we get this sort of transformation.
He believes.
But I love that tension that exists between them. Mm-hmm. That they are sort of they're sort of joined at the hip.
Yeah. But
with very different beliefs. And I'm assuming, we don't get a lot of the story in the film about Baze Malbus, but it's really interesting to have a very disillusioned guardian mm-hmm. next to one who's
very devoted
in the Force, who really believes in the Force.
Yeah, they're a fun dynamic.
Really marvelous. If anybody is interested in them, remember that there is a middle grade novel by Greg Rucka. I'm not sure
Rucka.
What's his name. Rucka.
Mm-hmm. And there's a manga adaptation.
There's the companion manga for it.
It's cool.
And it's a really wonderful story. And at least the novel, I haven't read the manga. Saw Gerrera is scary as shit in it.
He is, and it shows more of the dynamic between these two and that their kind of life at the temple. Yep. It's really fun.
Well, and I always love them because they feel like a gay couple. They feel like
they argue like a married couple, like an old married couple.
Like a gay couple. They bicker like a gay couple.
They're funny. They're so funny.
And so that's really fun. And in a middle grade book, that's really lovely that young people can sort of read these kinds of relationships as just yet another kind of relation,
right?
Rather than something odd or strange or an anomaly. It's just really beautiful. I highly recommend the book.
Well, it's fun that the book dives into it more than the movie gets to, but they're on opposite sides, like you said. One's devoted, one's kind of disillusioned and kind of forgetting that way of life, but they still respect each other to a degree. It's just they have the same goal, they just go about it different ways, and it's very fun to see their dynamic. They're truly funny. I would love to see a whole series about these guys. Just
I would love
living on the temple and hanging out with kids. They're funny.
Well, I'm crossing my fingers with the High Republic Battle of Jeddah.
Yes, the audio drama.
We might see that temple. We're not going to see them, but we might learn more about the Guardians.
Right.
So I'm going to do like triple cross. Here we
go. Yeah, there you
go. Because it would be really fun to know more about Jeddah, more about the temple, more about the Guardians. And I'm hoping that novel will give us a little more information. That novel is coming up pretty soon. So I'm
so it's funny too when the movie came out and we see the big statue of that Jedi falling down, and we know that they're mining the Kyber crystal,
right,
for the Death Star. And it's like they throw in, Star Wars is very good about throwing in like not throwaway lines or throwaway scenes or locations, but they always have a way of introducing something that you want to know more about and learn more about. And that's one of those things. Ever since I saw Jeddah, I was like, this is it's a Jedi temple, but who are these Guardians of the Whills? Who are these people?
Right.
They're not Jedi.
Right.
Who are they? Are they coexisting with the Jedi? And of course, it's not explained, but I'm very fascinated to see where we get to see them again.
That's why I'm hoping that novel will give us a lot more information about that whole moment.
Before we move on quickly, I want to talk about, since we're doing this in honor of Cassian, the Andor show. I think we should
Yes.
mention him. We haven't really mentioned him at all.
I know.
There's a lot of cool characters in this movie, but I wanted to talk about, I'm sure if you've watched this, you've definitely seen the Cassian Andor trailers. And by the time you watch this, I'm not sure when it'll be released, but I really like his character as a fun twist on what you would expect a rebel hero to be. Somebody that was a separatist before becoming a rebel hero, and this idea that he's kind of always been against the Republic in any kind of way, shape, or form. So it's fascinating to see him. And of course, everybody talks about how he does things that most heroes wouldn't do. You're not going to see Han Solo shoot a guy in the back.
Right.
So he's fascinating, and I'm wanting to see more of in Andor how he becomes the guy we see in Rogue One.
I have always been fascinated by him, and I was thrilled that they were doing a show on him, because in the past, Star Wars has been very, very about good versus evil and separating those two things very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how both Rebels and Clone Wars are responsible for murking the lines between what is good and what is not. And Andor is an excellent example of a sort of a morally ambiguous hero. And that I find really, really, really fascinating. I mean, the first time we meet Andor, he kills a colleague.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the first scene that we have with him. We don't know anything about this guy.
Right.
We know he's with the rebellion, and boom, done. Shot this guy in the back. That is not A New Hope.
No.
New Hope, Leia would not do that. Han Solo did kill.
I guess he did. I guess he did.
But Greedo is
a bounty hunter. That's different.
Right. But it's interesting to have a morally ambiguous hero, and I'm really interested in seeing sort of the genesis, the development, the history of Andor. How do we get to Rogue One? How do we get to Rogue One with the rebellion? Because there's always this tendency of like the rebels are always goody.
Yeah.
And I love that with Andor we don't have that. And I think the other character that we need to talk about is Saw Gerrera.
Yes.
He's the other one who is very morally ambiguous.
It's funny.
I would say morally problematic.
I would think it's funny how, and I don't know if they'll explore this because we know Saul's in the Andor series, but I wonder if they're going to explore, because Cassian, he said he's done terrible things and done bad things. We know Saul has done very bad things.
Right.
So I wonder are they going to, in Andor, are they going to show this is the line? Andor's kind of skating the line.
We'll find out.
I just jumped over it. Are we going to, I'm just curious what.
Jump over it. I don't think they're going to jump over it because
it's a show.
They've been very good at sort of creating this complexity.
Yeah.
I mean, the third sister in Kenobi was a fascinating character because of that ambiguity.
Yeah.
Because of that ambiguity. And so I'm hopeful that ambiguity will continue with Andor. You had mentioned before that, Saw Gerrera was the first character that we first see in animation that gets sort of added into live action. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's sort of
I don't remember where I saw this. It might have been a behind the scenes, but yeah. So when Rogue One was being developed, they were wanting this character that is Saw Gerrera, but they were wanting to create a new character that was very extremist, a rebel extremist, and kind of a terrorist in a way. And the story group had said, we already have we could use a character that we can make into that, and Saw Gerrera. And if you've watched the Clone Wars and his story and his tragic backstory about him and his sister fighting for their planet to be taken under rebel control or separatist control. I'm sorry. Right. So it's fascinating. And, nowadays we have Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, Ezra, and Sabine are coming. We have all these characters from animation jumping to live action. And I think a lot of people forget he was first introduced a long time ago.
I didn't know that. That's
the Clone Wars. So he kind of started a trend. And
right.
And he's popped up everywhere. He's in a video game, The Fallen Order. He's in comics. I mean, he's everywhere. He's a very interesting character. We're not a fan of him or his views. He's in that.
Yeah.
He's in the novel Rebel Rising by Beth Revis. Yeah, so he pops up a lot of different areas, and he's a very fun. He's in Rebels. We forgot to mention that. He's just an interesting character and a very interesting foil to the rebellion.
Yes. And it's fascinating now that I'm thinking about it. It's really interesting. He's one of those characters that in order for you to get the whole life story, you need to switch media in Star Wars.
You do, yeah.
Animation, junior novels, comics, video games, movies.
He's
So
everywhere.
it's really interesting that you're slowly constructing the life of Saw Gerrera, not chronologically, which is a very typical Star Wars thing to do. That you're slowly getting bits and pieces, and you need to sort of put it together. I haven't seen all the trailers of Andor. Does he show up in Andor?
He is in one of the trailers, yes.
Okay.
So yeah, he's Forrest Whitaker.
Wait, there's more Saw.
Yeah, Forrest Whitaker's going to reprise his role, so I'm very excited. He's a very good actor, so I'm interested to see what they do with him.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I find it really fascinating, and this is something that you mentioned before the recording, how the whole notion of representation is sort of embedded in this story. We have a female lead. We have Asian actors doing the Guardians of the Whills. We have Forrest Whitaker. We have all of these people that are sort of creating this very diverse world. This very diverse world. And I know that, some fans were sort of grumbling about this, but I really love Star Wars catching up with the diversity of our culture.
Yes, it's much needed.
Rather than assuming that Hollywood is white, Disney and Star Wars and Lucasfilm are sort of saying, well, we don't live in that world.
No.
And so it was a treat. I remember seeing a Vanity Fair picture of the cast and seeing all of this diversity. Bodhi, let's not forget Bodhi.
Oh, Bodhi's great.
I love that character.
It was a hero
character, but it is such an important character, and it is such an endearing character. An endearing character. My friend Kareem from Canada has talked in cons about sort of Middle Eastern representation in sort of like sci-fi and fantasy and action adventure and all of that. And Bodhi's up there.
That's awesome.
The first time I met him, he was a gender bending Ahsoka.
Very cool.
Second time I met him, he was Bodhi. And I was doing Thrawn that day. So
interesting.
We took a picture together of Thrawn and Bodhi together. And so it's really marvelous. It's one of the things that I sort of enjoy so much about sort of, let's just say, Star Wars finally catching up with the diversity of representation that we actually have in our country.
That's true.
And that I think is a beautiful gesture.
That's true.
Really beautiful gesture.
We have Star Wars, I think, under Disney's gotten a lot better about representation. Obviously, there's always room for improvement and things you could do better. But this is a feature film that was in theaters that was very, very anticipated by a lot of people. And to me, it's the most I think it has the most representation out of all the films. Things like the High Republic and those books and comics have done great for representation as well. But
yes, I agree.
Those obviously are not going to reach the same amount of audiences as a film like Rogue One. So to have that in Star Wars is really fun.
Yep. And we're going to have the Acolyte later on, 23, 24, I'm not sure when, that is sort of connected to the High Republic. So it'll be interesting to see how the wonderful diversity of representation that the High Republic novels have, how it translates to the show when it gets there.
It seems to be doing well so far. They've cast 2 African-American female leads, and then I don't know if you saw Squid Game on Netflix.
I have not.
I have not either, but the main character that he's also in a lead male role. So it looks like they're doing very well representation. So I'm excited to see that show too.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's another element of Rogue One that I just really love. And I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, that this is a war movie.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Talking about the sort of war element of it. I think it's important as well.
So this is one of the things I hear a compliment of this movie is we get to see the side of the war that the original trilogy doesn't show, because we're focusing on Luke, Leia, Han, and the main characters. These are kind of the background characters that we would see they don't get the spotlight, and they're very important. They're very vital. Without this mission, the rebellion doesn't live.
Right.
And it's very, very important. And it's funny.
A little line in the scroll.
I was about to say that's what
into a movie.
I remember when they announced this movie, and I thought, well, they've kind of already explained this story. It's in the opening crawl. What else do you need to know? And of course, I was a little young and ignorant back then, but it turned into a really great film, and it's very interesting to see that side of the rebellion. And I think Andor is going to explore more of that. But we've seen it in the Clone Wars. We've seen kind of the everyday, how the war affects everyday people. In this, we see the same thing on Jeddah. The planet is being mined and stripped, and it's just like chaos. And I think even Jen says it's a war zone. So it's home to a lot of places in the world. There's some places that are just ravaged with war and terror, and I think Rogue One does a good job of depicting that.
I remember having the Christmas time that Rogue One came out. I had a really interesting conversation with a barista at a coffee shop outside of Philadelphia, who was also a Star Wars fan, and he said something really interesting to me. He said, "I love Rogue One because it was a real Star Wars movie." And I that phrase sort of like, what is he talking about? And then I realized it's a war movie. It's a war movie in a way that Star Wars has always been sort of skirting around or sort of being connected to. But this is a movie that is all about war. And it's all about being during war, being at war. And I think he's right. So if you're listening, whoever you were, I don't remember your name. You were very young, and you loved Rogue One. And at the time, I was sort of like, yeah. But it's really interesting how his thoughts had sort of lingered with me for years, since the movie came out in 2016, about this whole idea of how present and how complex war is depicted in this film. I think it's a beautiful job.
Movie does a great job of connecting to A New Hope, and obviously it ends with it leading right into New Hope. And I love the throwaway lines of things to come. Like we get to see, and I explained it to Haley because I forgot about it until last night. We get to see Red 5. We see what happens to him, and obviously Luke takes up that spot in A New Hope. So I love that little connection. And
there are just so many
cool ones.
And the cameo appearance of Chopper and
Hera
Syndulla on the
intercom. Yeah. Oh man.
just filled with little things.
I know it's in the final battle, and I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. I know the ghost is there, but I couldn't see it.
There.
I've seen
there's
pictures.
Another scene where the ghost is parked.
Okay, so I must have missed that too.
Yeah. It's just parked in the corner.
That's cool.
So
there's a lot of fun connections
towards the beginning of the film. All right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, audience. Remember to like our videos and make sure you subscribe. That way, as we release throughout the season all of our shows, you can get a notification when they are ready to be watched.
Yes, and we're
on
Spotify. I have a TikTok that I am just posting fun stuff about comics and books I get, or action figures, or just anything cool Star Wars related. I try to post fun stuff, fun videos.
He's the young one. So
I didn't know what TikTok was until recently. So
bye, Nick. Bye, audience. See you soon.